Hey guys, I'm Becca.
And I'm Annie Grace.
And we are Bible fanatics.
Huge Bible fanatics.
We love the Bible and we love all that God has to tell us through it.
And we love it. Like the McDonald's commercial. We're loving it.
Ba-ba-ba-ba. In the next 12 weeks, you guys are going to learn about every book in the Bible.
But not us, because we already know all about the Bible.
I mean, not to brag, but we do.
Yeah. But don't worry, we'll get you guys up to speed. Soon you'll know it like we do.
There are 66 books in the Bible.
39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New.
And like us, you'll be able to go through the entire books of the Bible in only 3 minutes.
Let's do this!
Genesis tells us that in the beginning, God made the world. It also tells us that we mess things up, but in spite of that, God loves us and decided to stick with us.
Exodus is the story of how Moses saved God's people from slavery.
In Leviticus, God tells the people how to live so that they won't sin.
In Numbers, God counts God's people.
And in Deuteronomy, God tells the people how to live without sin again because they just don't get it.
Joshua led the people to the promised land and knocked down the walls of Jericho.
Then here comes the judges. Here comes the judges. All rise. Order in the court. Here comes the judges.
Ruth is a typical love story. Girl meets boy, and boy dies. Girl moves in with boy's mom and marries his cousin.
Samuel was such a great prophet.
How great was he?
Well, as you ask, he got 2 books of the story to tell of Israel's first 2 kings.
And speaking of kings, 1st and 2nd Kings tell the story of the rest of Israel's leaders.
And 1st and 2nd Chronicles tells the story all over again.
Ezra tells the story of how God forgave his people after the kings led them astray.
And Nehemiah rebuilt the wall that protected the city of Jerusalem.
Esther saves her people when she went to see the king.
And Job was a man who had a very, very bad day.
Psalms is a big book of praise right in the middle of the Bible.
And Proverbs and Ecclesiastes are both books that are filled with wisdom.
And Song of Solomon is all about love.
Isaiah was a prophet who tried to tell the people what they needed to know to obey God.
And Jeremiah was a weeping prophet who wrote his own book and the Book of Lamentations to mourn for God's people.
Ezekiel had some amazing visions from God that he shared with God's people while they were in exile.
And Daniel was a prophet too, and somewhat of a daredevil. Wait until you hear about the night he spent in a lion's den. Ooh.
And then there are the minor prophets. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah.
Boy, was that guy fishy.
And then there's Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi.
They all warned God's people to follow God. They all warned that God would punish them if they didn't stop sinning. And some of them, well, they talked about the Messiah that would come one day and save us all.
Matthew was all about the Messiah. It's one man's way of saying, hey, have you met my friend Jesus?
Mark also wrote a book about his friend Jesus.
Luke was a doctor who said, hey, have you met my friend Jesus?
And John wrote, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was my friend Jesus. Have you met my friend Jesus?
Acts tells us about how Jesus' followers started the early church.
And one of the early church leaders, a man named Paul, wrote a bunch of letters to these churches. 1 to the Romans, 2 to the Corinthians, and 1 of each to these churches. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians.
Wow. Paul also wrote some personal letters too. 2 to the Thessalonians, 2 to his bud Timothy, and 1 to Titus and Philemon.
Paul wasn't the only one to write letters. There's 1 for the Hebrews,
1 from Jesus' brother, James,
2 from Peter,
3 from John,
and 1 from Jude.
And then there's Revelations. That's where God tells us about how the story's going to end.
But the story's not over yet. We're still in it, right?
You're right. All the more reason to get to know the 66 books of the Bible.
Maybe you won't be able to do it in 3 minutes like we did, but the more you know it, the better you'll know Jesus.
That is so true. Bye.
Bye.